I'm going to keep it short and sweet for you. The Florida Gators are beating the Miami Hurricanes. Here's why.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And like I said, Florida's going to beat Miami. And I know that now the Miami fans are currently mad that I said that. Miami fans are currently typing a comment in the YouTube comments about how I look, or that I look just like a Florida Gator fan if you drew one up. I'll take that as a compliment. I am a Florida Gator fan, so I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you very much. But now they're getting mad and they're talking about, we had a top 5 recruiting class with their 73 3 stars. What else are they doing? They're saying some kind of nonsense about how this is their best team since 2001. If you can't get my gist, they're saying a bunch of stupid things because they're morons. No other way to go about it. I'm just going to tell you straight up, we're less than 2 weeks away from the game. Not mixing words anymore. You're an idiot, and it's as simple as that. Florida Gators going to beat the Miami Hurricanes, okay? Main reason? Here's the thing. I'm not saying the swamp, but that's going to come up. We'll talk about that. But the main reason? Because Graham Mertz is better than Cam Ward right now, okay? I'm not talking about, when we talk about the NFL draft. I'm not talking about who can throw the ball farther. I'm talking about a quarterback in year 2 that is better than a quarterback in year 1. And I'm making sure to word it this way very specifically, because I'm not saying that that's why he's better. I'm saying he's better and he's in year 2 of the system, as opposed to Cam Ward, who is worse and in year 1 of the system. Like I've said, I'm not going to argue with you over who you think is a better quarterback. I don't think that it's that big of a difference between them to say that I'm going to get upset about either way. You could feel how you feel. I'll respect that. No, I will. But Graham Mertz in year 2 will be better than Cam Ward in game 1 of year 1 at Miami for him. That's also a pretty big distinction, right? It's not just his first year in Coral Gables. It's his first game in Coral Gables. Graham Mertz has a full year in the system now, right? You look at when Graham Mertz came here, which was heavily criticized, and I don't argue wanting to criticize it. I don't. I criticize it as well. But Graham Mertz had a full year in the system. When he came in, he said, like, hey, I spent pretty much the spring learning who the hell I'm playing football with, and the summer and fall still learning the offense. Now I know the offense. There's a lot. Like, quarterbacks are asked to do a lot in this offense. I know that a lot of fans will go, oh, it's simple this, it's simple that. It's really not. I promise you. Billy Napier has publicly and openly said, quarterbacks have to do a lot more than just throw the ball for me. They do. They have to be the leaders. They have to keep the offense on schedule, on task. Graham Mertz in year 2 should be doing that. Look, there are plenty of things that you can talk about with the Florida Gators as to having doubts with where they've gotten better, right? You can say on paper the offensive line only got better on paper. We haven't seen them on the field. That's a totally fair take. Here's the thing. Quarterback, I don't think is one of those areas you can really dispute. I've said I think Graham Mertz is physically capped out. I do, or close to being physically capped out. However, He's a pretty accurate quarterback. And I don't just mean because he throws the ball short. I mean, a lot of his passes have been accurate over the field. I'm not talking about his completion percentage. I'm talking about him throwing the ball accurately. Now he should, in theory, have a better offensive line in front of him. And the offensive line should be improved. Even if you're not talking talent-wise, it should be improved because Graham should be better at navigating the offense with them and commanding what they do. He's got more rapport there. He's got receivers that are pretty dang good. I don't even want to compare to last year because, you lost Ricky, who was a first-round pick, by the way. Miami didn't have one of those. You lost Ricky, who was a first-round pick, and you replaced him with Elijah Badger. Pretty good football player there. But quarterbacks out of the portal typically get considerably better in year 2. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. Typically, quarterbacks in year 2 get better out of the portal. We've seen it happen all the time. Or not, I don't want to say a fact. That's statistically backed. You look at Bo Nix. You look at Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman in year 2. Michael Penix, who went, by the way, all first-round picks. Jackson Dart, probably going to be a first-round pick this year. Hell, you can look at Cam Ward. Last year was year 2 out of the portal for him. His completion percentage climbed. His average depth of target climbed. His yards per attempt climbed. His big-time throw climbed. And here's a big thing with talking about Cam Ward in year 2. Quarterbacks in general, but just Cam Ward's a good example for it. Big-time throw percentage grew. So he had a 1.9% of his throws were big-time throws in 2022, his first year at Washington State. In 2023, his second year, that number climbed to 5%. That's tight window throws, big-time throws, big-time play, big-time moment, all that stuff. It jumped considerably. That was a big part of his improvement there, okay? Watching that big jump. Quarterbacks out of the portal in year 2 tend to do that. That big-time throw climbs a lot, and a lot of it's because of the comfort around them. Cam threw more touchdowns last year, less interceptions. Cam, again, threw the ball downfield more often last year. He took, which, by the way, considerably less pressures in year 2 compared to year 1. He still took a lot of sacks, but took 3 less sacks on 40 less pressures. 40 less pressures is a big drop, okay? That's a big jump where if you see Florida make an improvement like that for Graham Mertz, you get to see that again as well. Time to throw got shorter, which for Cam was still one of the longest in college football. But Cam, in year 1 with Washington State, go back to his early days. He's hit the portal before. He's moved before. He's changed programs before. You can look at that and look at what he did in his early days at Washington State. Week 1 or game 1. I don't remember if it was week 0 but game 1 against Idaho. Completed 63% of his passes, threw 3 touchdowns, threw 0 interceptions against significantly worse competition. Week 2 or game 2 against Wisconsin, he completed 61% of his passes, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, took sacks in both of those games. That was something that he did notably, right? Throughout his career, he's taken sacks. He holds the ball a really long time. That's what Cam Ward does. That's why his offensive line looks worse than they really are, because he holds the ball for a really long time. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. You could argue whatever it is about, he was constantly under pressure because his receivers couldn't get open. He played in the air raid, right? The air raid's built on getting the ball out quickly, short passes, yards after catch there. He played in that. Hell, he had a lot of screens thrown too. So he had screens thrown and still had one of the longest times to throw in all of college football last year. He did. So despite all the screens, struggled early in Washington State, probably going to struggle early with the Miami Hurricanes. That's not the only reason that having a new quarterback will hurt the Miami Hurricanes. more than the Florida Gators, who, by the way, have a quarterback in year 2 of the system. That's not the only reason. We'll talk about more next on Locked On Gators. Sandals, sunscreens, snacks for the kids. What do they have in common? You probably bought a lot this summer, and it's not done yet, because guess what? August 31st, I expect to see quite a few of you, because August 31st, the Florida Gators host the Miami Hurricanes in their first game. You could use Ibata and get cash back on all of your purchases when you stock up on your summer or pregame tailgate essentials. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. So you can earn on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies, toys. You can make sure you're beating inflation, which crazy, right? You could try to beat inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, wherever in the podcast and on YouTube. Like I said, Florida Gators got to beat the Miami Hurricanes. I think we all agree here, right? No one's disputing that, right? We know that. But quarterback play is going to matter a lot, obviously. It's the most important position in sports. You could argue with it all you want. I don't care. It's the most important individual position in sports, quarterback. Baseball, a starting pitcher isn't as valuable because they pitch once every 5 games. Closing pitcher doesn't pitch enough of the innings. Basketball, you can't say point guard, because you can have guys like Kevin Durant who aren't point guards that are incredibly valuable, more valuable than any point guard you're going to have. Stuff like that. Quarterback, universally in football, you have a good one. You probably have a pretty good football team, right? Probably. Now we talk about, what do quarterbacks have to do? Command the offense, keep it going on track, keep it going on schedule, no false starts, no delay of games. You got to communicate things properly, right? It's hard to communicate things properly when you are making your first start for this program, right? As Cam Ward is doing for the Miami Hurricanes, making his first start for the program in the swamp. I know, Miami Hurricanes fans. You don't understand how a good home stadium, how a good home atmosphere, how a good home field can give you what's called home field advantage. Maybe it's because Miami doesn't have their own stadium. Maybe it's because nobody cares about the Miami Hurricanes games. But the swamp in Gainesville, right here, I don't know if you can see it. It's right behind me. If you're listening, it's right behind me. I'm pointing to it. I'm Vanna Whiting the swamp behind me right now, where we can say, yeah, 88,548 capacity, probably going to be up in the low 90s. I believe it was 91,000 when Utah came to town. Wouldn't shock me if that number is higher this year. But it's one of the best environments in football. I've often said that the swamp or Death Valley at night are the top 2 atmospheres in football, in my opinion. You could disagree. That's fine. But you have to communicate things, and helmet communication is a thing now, where the coaching staff can communicate to the quarterback through the helmet. He goes like that, so he can hear everything when it gets really loud. Cam Ward's going to be doing that a lot. It's not because his ears hurt. It's because he has to be able to hear. Crowd noise makes that a bit of a pain, right? Crowd noise is going to make that considerably harder for every team in Gainesville, but especially when you talk about the context of what's going on in week 1, because week 1 is going to be the first game for Cam Ward using that helmet communication in a stadium with, we'll say, 91,000 people. We'll put it to what Utah was 2 years ago, when he's never done it in a game before. The new team, I don't know, man. That's hard to sell me on. It is. The Swamp, again, is one of the best home atmospheres. That's unanimously agreed upon. I don't know anybody with a brain that actually says the Swamp isn't one of the best home stadiums. Because nothing rocks like the Swamp, right? It just doesn't. ACC folks, you're new here. It just means more, okay? And I think for Florida, that's an advantage. Yes, Florida has to play in that crowd that gets crazy, and Miami will probably have a few thousand fans there. I'm not going to hold you. Probably a few thousand. Might get a little loud. They might try to get loud when Graham Mertz is trying to hear the communication and the play call and go through. It's going to be a hell of a lot louder when Miami's on offense trying to figure that out, right? I'll tell you, I'll be front row. I'll tell you how loud it is on field level. It's going to be really freaking loud. Also, I want to get a little bit of a part here. I'm not saying that this is going to be a huge factor in the game, because it'll play a part, but I'm not going to say it's going to be a huge factor. Because when Utah came to Gainesville, we were talking about the environment. And it's like, oh, well, you play in high altitude. That's great. But that keeps you equipped to play in high altitude. That doesn't equip you to play in just all crappy environments, such as humidity. So that's still going to be a factor, I think, with Miami. Again, not as much of a factor as it was with Utah, for example. But Gainesville and Coral Gables are not the same, okay? Gainesville yesterday was 92 degrees, but with humidity, felt like 100, okay? The real temperature, or whatever you want to call it. Gainesville was 92 degrees yesterday, felt like 100. Coral Gables was 90 degrees yesterday and felt like 91, okay? Humidity is going to play a part. I promise you. Again, I'm not saying a huge part, but there's going to be some kids that aren't going to be as well conditioned as they thought. You see it all the time. I mean, teams always talk about how they try to prepare for the humidity, and then they're puking in the third quarter. I don't think Miami's going to do that, but week one, when you haven't played full games yet, and you're trying to get going consistently, probably going to go a bit up tempo. Gonna be a little bit of a pain there with the humidity. Again, I'm not saying it's going to be a huge factor. I think that the crowd noise, especially with helmet communication and trying to communicate to other receivers that are spread out, I think that's going to be a way bigger impact of the Swamp. But playing in Gainesville, humidity going to be a part of it, but also not even an outside external factor. Florida, on paper, has improved their weaknesses, and that should contribute to the Florida Gators when they beat the Miami Hurricanes on August 31st. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Gators. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot. It's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. That's why we talk about it a lot. Like Locked On, the #1 podcast network. That's why we talk about it a lot, right? Well, today's something a little different for you with FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Which your fantasy team? It's going to matter. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free breakfast in the podcast and on YouTube. To wrap up today's show, I, Brandon Olsen, right there, you can see it. Follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. You can check out our Florida Gators, Nevada Wolfpack, Baruch Bearcats, Dynasties, and Minnesota Vikings franchise mode on Whole Nine Sports YouTube, WHOLENINE Sports. But Florida Gators improved weaknesses on paper, right? And again, I acknowledge what on paper means. It means that on paper, in theory, you've addressed these weaknesses. That does not mean that they're going to be better. It means that on paper, you've attempted to address them. So in theory, they should be better. But in practice, we can't say that until they're on the field, in the game. So all we can say for now is that things should be improved. Florida Gators defense last year. Very frequently talked about as one of the worst Florida Gators defenses that we've ever seen. And here's the thing. On a simple play-by-play basis last year, they weren't horrible. They weren't. On a play-by-play basis, I don't mean yards per play, because yards per play was skewed by the thing that did really hamper this defense, which was the back-breaking amount of big plays. That's what made the Florida Gators defense look so horrible last year. In all of FBS, so 133 teams in the country, right? Florida allowed 57 plays of 20 yards or longer. So 57 times a team had a gain of 20 or more. That was 71st in the country. 71st out of 133, which is honestly a little below average. It is. That's not the part I'm going to kill you for. No. Florida allowed 36 plays of 30 yards or longer. So 36 times an opposing offense had a gain of 30 or more yards. That was 123rd in the country. Again, this is out of 133. Means you were the 11th worst. 11th worst team in the country in allowing plays of 30-plus yards. Now we're going to go to 40-plus. And it's not going to get much better, Florida Gators fans. 24 plays of 40-plus yards. Second worst in the country. Only better than UNLV, which means the Florida Gators defense allowed the most plays of 40-plus yards in the Power Four. Not surprising, right? When you're second worst in the country. But that's how bad Florida's defense was, where it wasn't the play-by-play. It wasn't every single play was picking up 5, 6, 7 yards. No, it was that even when you did, force a 3rd and 7, you allowed big plays. That's what the back-breaking part was. But again, in theory, that should be improved. Slot receivers did a lot of damage to you. New star. Pretty much your entire star rotation is going to be new. Okay? Outside receivers did a lot of damage to you. You've got a new secondary coach in Will Harris. You've got better safety play over top, which should help you, especially when you go quarters coverage, because they're going to be able to help to either side. So that should be improved. Your pass rush should be improved. Right? In theory, as a unit, your pass rush should be improved, because last year, some of the guys weren't super productive, and a lot of the times we heard, well, they're young, they're getting meaningful reps. Okay. Pass rush is the one where I'm most skeptical of, by the way. I just need to see it. I do. It's one of those things where I just need to see it. Secondary, I can convince myself that your play is going to be better there. Pass rush needs to be better. It wasn't just passing the ball, though. Run game gave up a lot of big gains. Kentucky, for example, LSU, for example, happened quite a bit. Missouri ripped off a couple long ones. Linebacker play should be significantly improved this year. Shamar James is back and healthy. Pop Howard has transferred in. Scooby Williams has left, which, again, I love Scooby. Not an SEC starter quality player. It's just not. You look at the Kentucky game, Big plays allowed to his side, big plays allowed with his misassignment. Kentucky game, Jalen Kimber was contributing to a large run being given up. On paper, in theory, you've improved there. Offensive line, you've got your starting left tackle and starting center returning at their positions. New left guard. Starting right tackle, moving to right guard. Might not be starting at right guard. New right tackle. In theory, your offensive line last year was one of the worst in the country. By default, you have shuffled 3 starters. Three positions will have new starters. So in theory, those guys should be improved and your offensive line should be improved, right? And again, your quarterback in year 2 being able to command the offense better, that's also important. Just saying, Florida Gators are going to beat the Miami Hurricanes. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free by visiting the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow, talk more Florida Gators football for Locked On Gators. I am Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon, and I will see you all next time.